Yes, it has.
Okay. Does this camera right here work?
Which one's
That one, no. I mean, it does, but that's not the one I use.
Don't use
That will
focus.
be circle thing.
Okay.
But we're on video right now.
Yes.
Wait, do they see us or no?
But they can hear us, that's no.
Yes, they can definitely hear. They can hear you better than they can hear me, probably. Okay, so primitive times. Belief was that illnesses and diseases were actually a punishment from the gods. So they just didn't realize, I mean, for us, what do we know causes disease or illness? Germs, right? Or maybe some abnormality in the body or whatever. But at that time, it's like, okay, if you're sick, it's because you've done something to make the gods mad. And this is a primitive belief, but you'll see this carries into well beyond primitive times. I mean, you'll see that in a little bit. Okay, tribal doctors treat illness with ceremonies a lot of times. These things still happen in places today. I mean, this is still practiced in some areas. I mean, I've seen it. So, herbs and plants were used as medicine. So, one example of this is morphine. Anybody know what plant that comes from? It's called the opium poppy. What does that sound like?
Opium.
Opium, which is a drug. Well, morphine is an opiate. It has the same effect as those drugs on the system. Very addictive. It can be very dangerous. Morphine is just a really heavy duty pain medicine you get after surgery.
They had to give me morphine.
It's very common to be given, like it's a surgical pain. Anyway, digitalis is another one. Anybody ever heard of the medicine digoxin? So it's a heart medicine. A lot of people take it. It helps to kind of slow their heart rate down so that it beats more normally. A lot of people take digoxin. Even kids who have abnormal heart problems can take digoxin. So it's from a plant as well. Initially it was. Trepanation or trephany. Surgically removing a piece of bone from the skull, like if somebody had swelling or even like a headache or something, or spirits or whatever they would term them, they would remove a piece of their skull.
Actually, that like relieve the pressure.
Yes, and that's probably why it came into being, because it could relieve pressure, and so for some that probably did help.
You have to put that piece of focus that skull back or something.
I don't know if they would remove it necessarily or not.
I think they just cut around it and pull it up a little bit, and it lets the air.
Not necessarily air.
Well,
they can still close it back
yeah.
up, but it just gives it space to do. And they still do that. That's something that they still practice for swelling. Like they can still do that. You know, remove a piece of the brain to allow it to swell, or not the brain, the skull to allow it to swell. Really kind of dangerous because your skull protects your brain. So anyway, there was a guy actually worked with his mom, and anyways, he was injured and had a gunshot wound actually to the head, and his brain would swell, so they did take out a piece of his skull to allow it to swell, to give it space to do that. Every time they put it back in, he just kept getting infections. They had to wear a helmet, instead of, need something still to protect it. One of the things that they actually believed this would do was remove spirits, like remove bad spirits from someone. That was one of the things that they would do. Now, this wasn't always necessarily even removing a whole chunk of bone. It could have just been drilling a hole in there too. And when I'm talking about drilling a hole, I'm talking about like the kind of drills that you like crank like this. It's not like electric drill, and there was no pain medicine at this. I mean, they had pain medicine, obviously, they had morphine, but there was no like putting them to sleep or anything like that. average lifespan was 20 years. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody only lived to be 20 and then they died. Average lifespan was 20 years, probably because there was a high rate of infant death of baby. So one of the things even if a lot of people live to be 80, but there's a lot of babies that die at 1 or 6 months old or whatever, that really brings the average lifespan down. Does that make sense? So, I didn't say this. The digitalis comes from what's called the foxglove plant. I don't know where I put on there. So morphine comes from the opium poppy, and digitalis comes from the foxglove plant. What's crazy is you think about, okay, digitalis or digoxin you only take, like when people are prescribed that medicine, they usually take like 0.125 or 0.25 milligrams. Teeny tiny amount, very, very tiny amount of that drug. And one of the things that they're supposed to do is always check their pulse before they take it, because if their pulse is not at least 60 beats a minute, they don't need to take that medicine because it will lower it too much to the point where it's not beating enough. Very potent medicine. Something that's monitored. You have to, every now and then you have to have blood levels done of that drug to see if it's toxic in your system if you have too much of it. So very potent. And what they would do is take the leaves off of this plant and chew them up. Okay, so what are some risks with that?
Overdosing.
Yeah, you don't know how much you're getting, and this leaf may be different from that leaf.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, that would be a big issue. Trepiding or trepanation, this actually continued well into like the Middle Ages. So this was done for thousands of years still from there. Okay, Egyptians. Embalming was something that they practiced, which is similar to kind of what we do today. It's something that helps preserve the body. But it was done by special priests. They were very specific. They had that specific job. They were not the same as the doctor priests. They had their own, as were two different jobs. But really advanced the knowledge of anatomy, because you remember, I'm sure y'all learned about this at some point. Do y'all remember what they did with the organs?
They oiled jars.
Yes, not big jars. They had, yes, they used all kinds of stuff on them. And so, but yeah, they would put their organs into jars, they removed their brain, they removed specific organs, and they buried them with them, but not necessarily in their body. So they were able to learn a lot about the anatomy of the body because they did that. Very strong antiseptics were used to prevent decay. And then gauze was actually really similar to surgical gauze that we use today. So let me show you guys. Oh, sorry. Gauze is
And they put that inside of your teeth.
okay, you've probably seen this. It's kind of rough. Okay, the reason is that it has a wicking aspect to it. So when you put it on a wound, it actually like pulls fluid to it. That's why it really sticks. If you ever get an abrasion or something, this is probably not what you want to put on it, because it is going to stick and really hurt you take it off. But that's really similar to the same gauze that they use. Okay, we'll pick up here next week.
You mean to just set it right here?
Yes, that's